I really do love Youth for Christ. We're at 29 years now. I can't think of another place I'd rather be. I started my ministry time when I was about 14 in my small church in Rose Isle, Manitoba. It's hippie country. And it's right on the edge of the Pembina Hills, and people do a lot of gardening and do a lot of marketing out of their gardens, secret gardens. And it's a pretty awesome place to live. Grew up in a family of 7 boys. My mother went to an early grave as a result of that. Died very, very suddenly of a brain tumor. And but our family's tight. We welcomed a stepmother into that mix, and she's great. She never had any kids, so we didn't have to blend a family. And but I've got 6 brothers scattered across Western Canada. And we love to get together and do stuff and have a lot of fun together. Don't see each other very often. My wife's family, also a family of 5 that she grew up in, 5 siblings, and both homes, devout, godly homes. Very, very committed, slightly conservative, but left some room for us to grow and to model. But we always knew we were loved, and loved deeply. Yeah, I'll probably do this a couple of times throughout the afternoon, but that's just who I am. I'm not going to apologize for that. And then we get the voice back and we go on, and and just come on. I learned that from Shepsky. Come on, and also Joel. When he prays, come on, come on, God, get busy. Let's go. Don't you see where we're at here? So that's the great part about YFC is that there's some unique approaches, and I've just appreciated so much the variety of presentations, the challenges. For an old fart like me being here, old person like me being here, and good save, yeah, and learning things. And I think it was Adam who said yesterday that I've learned a little bit, but I've learned that there's so much more to learn. And so I just want to challenge you with that. What's that, Carissa? Okay, sorry, Carissa. Where is she? Oh, she ducked out. She's heard this before. And she's what? Hey, there you go. Perfect. Perfect. So our families have been excellent places for us to find God at work. And that's where I started. My youth ministry started in my little church. I wanted to be a pleaser, and I've been a pleaser all my life. And so I started doing things in church, got to be the volunteer youth leader, Sunday school teacher, choir director. Didn't know really how to direct a choir at all, but I did it because nobody else was there to do it. A church of 40. And so you volunteered for that kind of stuff. And so that's where my ministry started. And I always wanted to do something for God from a very young age. I wanted to be a medical doctor till they looked at my hands and they said, no, Harms, think of another occupation. And then I took a chemistry class and they said, no, you know what, you won't be a doctor. Ange and I got married in 1973. I was all of 19. And after that, we kind of left our devout Christian life for a stretch of about 2 years. Kept our foot in the church, but wanted to play in the world for a while because we'd never done that. And so it wasn't evil or wicked, but it wasn't meaningful. At the 2-year mark in our marriage, we said, God, take us wherever you want, whenever, wherever. We thought for sure Africa was going to be our home. And I didn't want to go to Africa, and my wife wanted to go to Africa much less than that. We ended up in Steinbach, of all places. Steinbach, Africa. Shane knows Steinbach. And so, but it's, and I resisted moving to Steinbach because Steinbach at that point was probably 90% Mennonite background. I was a Mennonite. Dana knows Steinbach. Her parents actually moved to Steinbach, or close to Steinbach now, Kleefeld. Sorry, Jana. Sorry, what did I call you? Dana, I'm sorry. Dana, Jana. So I got a letter mixed up. Yeah. And so I'm sorry. Yeah, very close. That's what I told you before. I read name tags, but I don't know how to say it. I forget what I was telling you. Moving to Steinbach. Moving to Steinbach. I didn't want to go to Steinbach, but today I don't want to leave Steinbach. We worked at Red Rock Bible Camp for 2 summers, got invited to come to this church and to be a youth pastor. I'd never been to college. I went to high school, and then I got in my dad's big truck and helped him move houses. So from that moving truck, the Lord called us to ministry. And so we went, and we said, God, you know, we told you anywhere, anytime, Steinbach, okay, we'll go. And church of now, 750 people, so coming from 40 to 750. You have to understand, grade 10, I was so close to a nervous breakdown because I was so insecure with who I was. I was almost as tall as I was wide, and it didn't help me a whole lot. And so I suffered a lot with that. And so when I got up in front of 750 people and was supposed to say something intelligent, it took everything within me. I honestly thought I was going to die. Our first youth meeting at that church, we had 150 kids, ages 12 to 25. They didn't know about junior high, about senior high, about college and career, so they just all came together. Ange and I were the only people, and we were 23. The oldest people there were 25. So I had to learn my way through youth ministry. I made so many mistakes, but the church was so gracious. They put me through college. They paid for my tuitions, allowed me to graduate, and I'm forever indebted to Evangelical Mennonite Church Steinbach. The funny part in there was that when Ange and I were working, we were used to a pretty good salary. She was a banker, and I was a foreman for my dad's moving crew. And so we had a good chunk of change at the end of every month, and trips away, new cars, new house, new clothes. When we went to church to be the youth minister, suddenly we had a third of the cash flow. But we thought, well, we're doing God's work, and so we'll just be happy there, and we'll manage somehow. When they told us our salary, I had no courage to say, sorry guys, but that's just not enough. And so remember, we cut back 2/3. Right. And then they told us, we expect you to dress sharp and entertain a lot. And I just said, how are we going to do that? And so we lived like that for 2.5 years and almost starved. And finally, I put together a budget for the church council and said, here's what we're spending, here's what I think would be reasonable, and we got a 25% increase in that year. But I was so nervous talking about money to this church council because you had business owners. The guy that owned Loan Windows was sitting there. And he taught me one of the biggest lessons about money. We had a coffee house ministry, and we lost about $700 on our first coffee house. Hadn't planned very well. And so now it's up to me to figure out how we're going to raise that $700. So I made an arrangement with Mr. Lowen that I could come and see him. And I was going to ask him if he would cover our deficit for the $700. This goes back to about 1980-ish. And I walked into his office, and Lowen Windows was the largest business in our city, employed about 500 people, and an executive office with furniture from around the world, and it was incredible. I was so nervous. I had never been in a place like this before. And so I walked in, and I was just red and nervous, and we talked pleasantries, and I sat there shaking, and he asked me, why did you come? What's on your agenda? I said, Mr. Lowen, we had a coffee house, and we lost $700. I'm wondering if you would cover our deficit. He got as red as I was. And he said, Jim, don't you ever come here asking me to cover your deficit. Start planning, and I'll sign up front, but I will not cover your deficits. And I thought, oh, good. Why don't you just shoot me now? You know, how are we going to raise $700? If Lowen's not going to pay it, who will? The best lesson I ever learned was to plan before you dig. And wow, that set me off on a journey. Mr. Lowen and another Mr. Lowen, because that's all who lives in Steinbach is Lowens. Mr. Lowen and Mr. Lowen both committed to me as their youth pastor that day, we will underwrite your coffee house ministry at our church over and above the budget for every coffee house, but you bring us a budget before the coffee house happens. Do you know that we never lost another penny at our coffee houses? We always managed our budget. And so it was a lack of planning that got us going there. So I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty passionate to talk to you about money. It's not really about money, but it's about expanding our ministry team, getting more done in the kingdom. And so if you can kind of leave money out of it for the largest part of the afternoon, you'll be a better person for it. But to think about planning and working the plan to get ministry partner development done. And we're going to drop the screen some. So I'm pretty excited. Whoa. There we go. Not bad for a first lesson, is it? Whoa. Ministry partner development, money and people, and Youth for Christ. When I came into Youth for Christ, we need to start there. I think one of the other speakers somewhere earlier in the week said, I was asked to write a letter and send it to 150 people. Don't remember who said that. But that's about where I started, 1989. Write a letter, send it to 150 people, and let's see where you go from there. And wow, having had that minimal salary, I thought for sure I'd take another third decrease going into this. This whole deputation concept near kept Ange and myself from joining one of the most exciting ministries because of the fear of asking people to partner with us. And so that this afternoon, I want to help you. If you're at the place where you're thinking this whole deputation process is a curse, to look at it as a blessing, turning the curse to a blessing. And so let's just invite the Lord to guide our thoughts as we go through the afternoon. Jesus, as we talk about expanding our ministry this afternoon, inviting others to come and share in the things that you're doing in our cities, in our communities across the country, we ask that you would help us to be very diligent, to pay attention to what your Spirit is prompting us through the conversations that we'll have with each other. And so would you guide our hearts and minds and give us great joy in these next hour and a half. In the name of Jesus, amen. We have got in Youth for Christ, we have got in Youth for Christ some of the greatest resources possible. Maureen Price and Daryl joined us for today. And Maureen and Tim Coles and John Berard and perhaps a number of people on the team have put together some very, very excellent resources. So no longer does a person have to come into Youth for Christ and hear the words, give us 150 names and your testimony letter, and I'll write a letter to go out there and we'll see the money just running in. There's this thing called momentum. How many of you here have been through momentum start to finish? Hands up high. Hands up high. You've been through momentum. Momentum. We're not talking about your ministry partner development with Paul Robertson in Toronto or whatever else you're chatting. Is there only one person here that's gone? Oh, sorry. I was ignoring that side of the room.
What do you mean by start to finish?
By looking at the whole thing from beginning to end.
I think I What's have. The end? Yeah.
What's the end? Okay. Yeah.
I think I have.
Okay, so we've got a couple of people here. Okay. Some of you have some resources that I know that YFC Toronto or Youth Unlimited has the Paul Robertson and the intro to YU, correct? Which is probably, I have not seen that material, but we're going to not go through momentum, but I want to guide you to consider the resources that are actually available. We're going to go really, really fast in this. You find momentum at the YFC hub, staff only. And so that we can help you get into that. If you're not sure how to get into that, and I should have put those instructions up here, maybe guided you through that. But go to the hub and it will just guide you through how to get to momentum, all right? And so that it just gets started, and you'll notice the yellow highlights that are there. You click on any of those highlighted words, and it opens up another window for you and gives you an added resource as to where to go. We will not take the time today to do those. We'll not take the time to do each of those highlights, but it talks about, number one, exploring your call. And if you've got some issues in figuring out how did I get called to this ministry, it's got a great guide for you to be able to define what does call to YFC mean for me. What does it mean? How do I know I was called? What does that mean? And so it guides you through that. From there, it gets you started to just to watch some videos. There's some excellent videos. It continues to talk about your calling here. Changing your perspective. There's a huge misunderstanding with ministry partner development. You know, that curse to blessing. And so that rather than looking at a curse, you want to be able to change that to a blessing. And so again, there's articles for you to read in here. There's Gino Retta, Brett's spiritual father. And he talks about what it meant. Gino has been at a receiving end. He now has the joy of giving. And he talks about that in this little video. And so some great information for you to think about. You're not alone in this. Take a look around you in this room. All of us are at that place where we're expected, I think almost all of us, where we're expected to raise our support, to raise the dollars that we need in order to get our ministry done. And so again, it guides you through. We want to take you a step further with some biblical. What do you mean, deputation's biblical? Deputation's excitingly biblical. And Jesus models that for us. The disciples models that for us. And I was excited to think about it as what Jesus does with 2 small fishes and 5 barley loaves. And he multiplies them and expands that. And that's kind of what we're doing with this whole ministry, is inviting thousands of people to come in and to join us in getting this work done, of getting the message of Christ out to the youth culture that we're there with. And so it's a matter of perspective, how you look at it. And so again, changing that curse to a blessing. A momentum coach. When you sign up at Youth for Christ, you have the opportunity to be connected to a momentum coach. Maureen or Brett or somebody, who's the, Naomi Vandevish. Daryl Parsons. We've got a momentum coach right here in our presence. Would you all bow to Daryl? And that's an exciting place to be. You're not sure how to proceed after this session, talk to Daryl. Don't talk to me. No, talk to me, talk to Daryl, talk to Naomi. So there's resources. You're not in this alone. And so that we move on really, really fast. What's your story? And there's nothing that pulls on people's hearts like a well-told story. And so put together the best story, even if you have to make it up. No. Put together a great story and tell that story where you go. Take a look at what this says. You're going to have to look at what support level do you need. We should click on that and see what it does for us. Oh, come on. What's your salary? I thought they'd give us a salary scale there. I was hoping I'd maybe get an increase, but it's your boards and your directors help you set that salary. But then you've got to tell that story about what's that need. Now that's where we all get diarrhea, is when I've got to tell somebody else what I need, right? Whoa, Imodium in my pocket. Oh, I had some. And so that take some Imodium and then tell them what you need, and tell them what you need them to partner with you. All right, and so making a list Maybe you could add that to the momentum, is Imodium. Imodium sponsors this program. So, perfect. Be a great fundraiser. Yeah. Making that list of people, and again, it guides you through 100 people. Oh, a minimum of 100 people. All right. And be thinking about how we're going to do that. Who are we going to include on? And you're saying 100 people, Harms. Come on. I don't even know 50. Well, and we limit that little crowd. We'll talk about that a little later on. All right, and then writing that first letter and committing it to paper. And you just wonder, what do I put in that letter? Talks about what you might consider putting in that letter. As we get towards the end of it, you'll see some other resources that are going to be excellent for you. You guys excited about Momentum yet? No, nobody's excited. Yeah. It's a great tool. It's so good. Oh, it's great.
I tried so much, but they're so good and kind.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They get you. If you just want to talk to about how hard it is and just have someone encourage you, that's what Momentum is.
Awesome.
It's not just like tools, it's also just like emotional support.
Are they putting money in your support account to be saying this?
No.
That's awesome. Naomi's the best.
I wish,
Naomi's the best. Oh. All right, so you write that letter, and they help you read through it. And then here comes the next really unnerving part. Picking up the phone and saying, hello, my name's Jim. Did you get my letter? And your mouth just dries up and you don't know what else to say. They will guide you through what to do and how to make that call. And there's a great video in this section here. I think it's Laura Bronson, if I'm right, on how to make a phone call. And so these videos are fun to watch. We don't have the time to watch it because I want to get you out of here before 3:30. And then while you're making phone calls and personal visits, make sure to manage your partner list. Managing your partner list, we'll talk about it a little more later on, but in our staff in Steinbach, I'm the guy who picks up the mail now. That's my primary focus. And it's amazing when a staff person sends their newsletter by hard copy mail, at how many stinking letters come back to us at 89 cents a piece. And then you wait and wait and wait for staff to upgrade, correct the addresses, and then put another 89 cents on and send it back out. And so managing that personal database, it's hard work. And you got to be listening, and you've got to be in touch with your ministry partners and not sending letters to people who've passed away a month ago or 6 months ago. And, or if these people that have deceased are on your pre-authorized donations, even more embarrassing when the family finally catches up with you and says, hey, you've been drawing on this account. It's really an estate account by now. Well, you should have told us he passed away. No, I should have been listening as to who passed away. And sometimes you don't always get to that, but you pay attention to that kind of stuff. Well, one letter isn't going to do it, so you got to do the second letter. And then, well, what do I put in that second letter? Again, ideas for what to put in that second letter right here. And we're zooming through this really, really fast. I'm a little despairing that connecting with churches comes so far down in here and is at 3.5. Because my philosophy and my thought is that we should have been connecting with our home church before we gave that application to YFC. We should have been connecting with our local church before we even talked to the executive director, is there a job for me there? To see whether the church would have a confidence in me to actually be a missionary in our youth culture and to get that approval. And so churches are saying, well, why didn't you come and talk to me earlier about whether we'd suggest that you go there or not? And so that if you haven't had that conversation, you're already a staff person, you know what, then just go and talk to them and let them know what you're doing and say, sorry I didn't come back here before I got hired, but now that I'm there, would you rubber stamp me and just tell me I'm a good missionary anyway? Or help me become a good missionary. But talk to your churches, let them know where you're going and what your plan is. Setting up a meeting with the pastor, so great information there as well. Caring for your partners, it's all explained in here. And creating a communication plan. How often do I talk to them? Do I have to write them hard copy letters only? Can I use my email? Can I actually talk to them about, would you want to double your support? And they usually hang up. Do you know what? Au contraire. Carissa, when she went from YFC Steinbach to YFC Canada, made a deliberate choice and a deliberate motion for every person she called on her list to say, is this a good time for us to talk about whether you'd like to consider increasing your support? After you've done it the first time, the second time's so much easier. Do you know that 40% of Carissa's participants increased their donations? Wow. From simply being asked, would you consider doing it? They'd been supporting her, I think, for about 3 or 4 years at YFC Steinbach at that same $25 or $50, and most of them doubled because she asked. Wow. And again, we get so uptight and scared about asking. And so creating that communication plan, figuring out newsletters, professional-looking cards. Heiko in our office took his prayer card, realized that he could get his prayer card, and it's about 3 by 5, and he got it magnetic backed, and so that it can go on every kitchen's billboard, the fridge. And how often do you go to the fridge? And you always meet silly Heiko. He's standing there asking you for another prayer, for another $1. And it's great. And so that make sure that your partners have magnetic fridges as opposed to some of the stuff that doesn't take them at all. But having cards just to be reminders for them. Discovering creative ways to communicate your story. Back to the story again. And you just keep telling stories. That's the fun part about ministry partner development, is that we're storytellers. Jesus, storyteller of all storytellers. And he drew people in, and he said, hey, tell me about that. What did you mean when you talked about the lost sheep, about the lost coin? And so tell these stories that come up. And we're almost at the end of momentum. And it takes you much, much longer when you press on every one of those yellow dots. But referrals or advocacies. You may have come to a place where you've run out of names, and you recognize that maybe Mr. Lowen, the guy who had the heart attack when I asked him for $700, maybe he has a circle of people around him that one of them could cover my salary. And if I can get Mr. Lowen to make a few contacts on my behalf because he believes in me so much. Do you know that there is no shortage of coin out there? No shortage. And I swear to that as a Christian. There is no shortage of funds. Let me tell you this story. We had a ministry in Thunder Bay. Youth for Christ had a satellite, Steinbach had a satellite in Thunder Bay. We had 2 Plymouth Brethren backgrounded men on a board of directors. Rod knew absolutely every business owner in Thunder Bay. He owned the BFI business and he owned Courtesy Freight Systems. So he brought all the materials from Toronto, from Winnipeg, into Thunder Bay and northwestern Ontario. He knew absolutely everybody. His one deterrent for fundraising was that he was a Plymouth Brethren background. Don Shaver used to work with Youth for Christ, Power and Light Company back in the early 60s. I don't know when Power and Light Company was around. I do remember Power and Light because I think we may have gone to one of their rallies in Winnipeg. Don Shaver, Richard Berry Fine Leather. He didn't have the street people coming in to shop at his house, at his store. He had the elite of Thunder Bay coming in, and they knew everybody. They had men's prayer breakfasts, and Don's deterrent was that he was a Plymouth Brethren background. Well, what's with the Plymouth Brethren? They never ask anybody for funds. They will not. It goes against their theology to ask people to participate in financing. God's work done God's way will be supported by God. And so, Don, we've decided, after 5 years of trying to raise money in Thunder Bay, that we're going to close the ministry. Rod and his wife take Andrew and myself out to the Valhalla to a delightful Chinese buffet, very high end. That's where Rod went. And we're sitting and having dinner, and along comes a man in a very fine suit, wife in a very lovely fur coat, and Rod introduces Andrew and myself to his friend. And he tells him what I do. And the man's response was, "Damn, do we need people like you on the street." We had just closed the bank account for Youth for Christ Thunder Bay. And so the gentleman walked away. I said, "Rod, did you ever ask him and tell him about what Youth for Christ was doing, even if you didn't ask him for money?" And he said, "No." I said, "Why wouldn't you?" "Well, he's not a believer." And I said, "Who is he?" And he said, "He owns Halverline Trucks, a huge trucking company. And for him, $200,000 donation to YFC Thunder Bay would be nothing, pocket change." Well, he's no more than out the door, and along comes another man in a fine suit, woman in a fur coat. Rod introduces, and the man says to me, "Damn, do we need people like you on the street." Identical words. And Rod just wishes he could be under the table instead of beside it, because he knows what's coming. "Rod, did you ever ask him about participating with Youth for Christ?" "No, I never did." "Why not?" "He's not a believer." I said, "Did you hear what he said?" Do you know what? The people, unbelievers, if we want to label them that, have as much interest, maybe more, than our Christian folk. Because if we, as Youth for Christ people, Youth Unlimited people, think that we have an inkling about what might address some of the issues of our youth culture, they want to jump in because they don't know. They have no idea as to what to do with the kids on the street. And if we think we have something, a little ask, and they'll be right there. Almost without fail, I guarantee. But it takes the courage to be able to ask them and to present it in such a way that we invite them into this ministry, whether they're believers or not, and so that the referral and advocacy. So don't forget, there's lots and lots of money out there. Then there's a book list below. Unbelievable. There's so much written about ministry partner development, so that the next statement I'll make may not endear me to you very much. There shouldn't be a good reason why you're not fully funded, because the resources are out there. The resources are out there, and to put some of them to use. Well, there's a bunch of question and answers here. I find it difficult to raise support because I'm an administrator. How do I encourage people to partner with me? Well, that's the place I'm at right now. So guess what? I'm telling Ruben's teen stories. I'm telling Ashley's teen stories, Heiko's teen stories. I'm telling people that Mike, our hockey chaplain, has led 4 of our key hockey players, 2 junior hockey players and 2 high school hockey players, to a relationship with the Lord. Guess what resource he used? Probably one of the most outdated resources, your most important relationship. And so Mike's got this pink little book with hockey players introducing your most important relationship. And Braden Pertil, captain of the Steinbach Pistons, Anavet Cup champions, 2018, says, "I don't have a relationship with Jesus, but I want that relationship." Doesn't have a clue what he's signing up for, but he signs up. Well, I can tell that story now, and people love that story. Braden Pertil now following Jesus because of Mike's boldness to share Christ. And so they send me more money. And they send Mike more money. Some do, not all. Nobody's taken us off their list for telling that story. So as an administrator and more administrative, I tell our staff stories. Oh, sorry.
Uncle. Question.
Yes.
Probably there is something like this there. I didn't check, but I want to ask you because I have an opportunity. But how would you do this if you're on my spot, someone who is just starting a ministry and really can't share anything except vision? So I do not have, but it is still in a very beginning stage.
Yep, beginning stages.
Yes.
Yep.
So for me, it's very, when I compare myself to others, why would you give money to me?
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah.
Are you
Who am
saying
I?
because you don't have like ministry stories to
Yeah,
share?
I mean,
You don't have
I
those
do have
experiences?
some now. But
You have
no,
some now.
It's not, amazing.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
so.
I'll try and answer it really short, and we can talk about it a little
Yeah.
more after. But when we started Youth for Christ Steinbach, remember I was a youth pastor, and it was actually, I didn't tell you that story, that's why you didn't know that. There's three youth pastors who had a vision to start a teen drop-in center. We made presentations to our church councils. Now, I'm a youth pastor saying our community needs a teen drop-in center. What do you mean? We hired you to be a youth pastor at 1/3 of the money that you were earning earlier, and so why do we need a youth drop-in center? So very precarious place to be, to now ask them to consider giving more money to a youth center. I had never intended to be that youth director for the youth center at that time. 3 youth pastors made a proposal to their church council saying we need a teen drop-in center in our community. We didn't know about it, and it happened within 2 weeks of each other, 2 weeks, in a 2-week span. 3 churches, the conservative evangelical Mennonite, where I was, the middle of the road evangelical Free Church, and the Charismaniacs, Full Gospel, all said the same thing. Don't do it alone. Get Steinbach Association of Youth Leaders to umbrella it, and get an organization that works with troubled teens. And our mouths fell open, and it was like God had written on the wall, it's time for a youth center in Steinbach. Wally Schmidt from YFC Winnipeg had been on my case for about 2 years already saying, come on Harms, come and join YFC, Church Youth Ministry Resources in Winnipeg. I didn't want to move to Winnipeg because now I liked Steinbach by now. And so we started at that point, we started research and development saying our town needs a youth center. Now, in Steinbach, there's at least 36 churches, evangelical churches, for 15,000 people. 50% of the kids participate in church youth groups. And now we're going to say that we need a teen drop-in center in our community so that we can get the kids who aren't coming to a neutral place. Now we had to figure that out and we had to word that properly. But now you see the obstacle that we're there. We've got all these youth groups, and there were lots of good youth groups, mine being one of those. They were great youth groups. We had a lot of fun. And we did a lot of, and we had kids coming to Jesus. And now we want to have this youth drop-in center. So the obstacle was huge. How are we going to convince them that we need this neutral teen drop-in center for kids to come in? And so we had to put together a case for here's why we need this. Because most of the kids, from the day I arrived in Steinbach, if I invited them to come to church, guess what their response was? To hell with the church. I don't need the church. I don't want the church. The church had a very, very bad flavor in the minds of kids on the street. It hadn't done anything really good for their parents and nothing for them. Why would I want to be involved in church? And so we decided we needed a neutral zone where kids could come and meet, be in the care of caring adults trained to guide them towards making wholesome life choices. Now, tell me a person in your community who wouldn't want to embrace that, right? We're making wholesome life choices. We're not saying we're going to be introducing Jesus, although we've never hidden the fact that we provide spiritual life care. As we have discussions with people, when we met with the social workers, child and family services, and the government workers, we will be providing whole life care, including spiritual care, introducing kids to Christ and the opportunity for Christ. And they all embraced it and said, we think it's a great idea. We think it's a marvelous idea. Now, not every organization said it was a great idea, but you have to get that community around you to go along with that. Yeah.
I totally agree. But for me, just to go a bit more in depth,
Yeah.
I'm not asking for ministry. I'm asking for me
Yeah.
as a national director.
Right.
I first need to be funded in order to do anything, because I'm currently spending half of my time working part-time so that I can fill the gap.
Right.
And there's a very, I don't want to take time, but
Yeah.
there's a research done, and it's a US organization called Nexus International. They did a research, and they said that there is, don't hold me for the number, but it's around here. 20% of youth ministry is happening in US and Canada.
Right.
and 80% of finances for youth ministries are here in US and Canada. And 80% of ministry is done in Europe, and only 20% of finances for youth ministry is in Europe.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's so many variables.
Yeah.
And in Serbia, I reached my cap,
Okay.
and that cap was never reached before
Okay.
from any staff in Serbia.
Okay.
But still, that's not even. It's like 10%.
Right,
It's not even
right.
10%.
Yeah.
And churches are not really open to help, and they're helping their workers inside the church. And so it's there's so many challenges and so many levels that it's very intimidating for me to do it. Plus, I'm very, yes, I talk a lot, but for me it's hard to ask for this.
Oh.
Mostly because of the culture where I'm from.
Right. Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the hard part is also when you go and ask for, support for a country like Italy, which is commonly seen as a Christian country, and it's also a first world country. I mean, it's in the G8, it's a wealthy country, so why should people from abroad, finance projects or support a ministry in Italy, which is a rich country?
Yeah.
That's probably another of the tricky part,
Yeah. Yeah.
We are a poor country.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I
Right.
mean. Yeah. So try to imagine Italy, which is not
Third world.
Right.
but still, the church is less than 1%.
Yeah.
Many people want to go full time to Italy, but since the church is less than 1%, they don't have enough funds for all the full time workers.
Exactly.
So what do? You can still try to find support somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then you get to the problem. Yeah, but you're Italian. I mean, Italy is a wealthy country.
Right.
It's pretty tricky.
Right.
in our
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. Brett, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, some of these very objections that you guys are posting now are things that are walked through in momentum.
Yeah.
Learning how to communicate your calling, even though ministry hasn't been established in those areas, but communicating clearly your calling, your vision for where things are like. There are tools, practical tools to walk you
Yeah.
through that, and a coach for you could be helpful too. So
Yeah.
that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Brett. Josiah, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, for me, what was college, I outline who I'm trying to help.
Right.
Like, really at-risk kids. Like I say, in the past year, I've dealt with 16 incidences of suicide. Imagine how much more I could accomplish with more finances. Or I talk about 75% of First Nations girls before they hit 18 are sexually abused. You say these are the kids we're going for. And you lay out who it is you're wanting to go for. And kind of like Jim, like he was talking about, they had a vision, we want to do a drop-in center. And that might help. You tell people what it is you want to do, who it is you're targeting. That might help.
Okay. We need to zoom along here, guys. Great questions, and this material just has excellent resources for you. Look at this section here, the templates and the samplers, and just so many different things. A ministry PowerPoint that you can click on, first letters of support, prayer card samples. There's just some really, really rich stuff there. Going down here for some of the books and materials that are available, Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. Click on the internet, go to the Spirituality of Fundraising, Henry Nouwen, boom, it's right there. Read it, let it soak, and develop a concept and a perception of how do I treat ministry partner development, asking people for money. Support raising solutions, the third from the bottom, support raising solutions. Excellent, excellent resource. I introduce you to The God Ask, one of the finest books that has come out. How many of you have read it? You've read it. Good, many, many. And if you haven't read it, please get a copy really, really soon. Now, the beautiful part is that you're all going home with one of these, fully funding your ministry. And Shane, if I could get you to cover that side of the room, and Scott, you want to cover this side of the room? I read 20 of these books a month. This is great. The key principles of this book are condensed in here. I made it through high school on Cole's Notes, and it works so well. And here's another Cole's Notes for The God Ask. It's outlined for you, and it'll whet your appetite to want to dive into the God Ask and see that. One of the other very fine books, and it's really very, very similar, is this practical guide, People Raising. Again, the Ministry Partner Development has a few extra twists, but again, very, very similar. So those are the resources that we have in just momentum, all right? And so that we, any questions quickly about momentum? Let's introduce you to Nomi Vandevish and Daryl Parsons.
Hey,
Daryl.
Yeah, just a couple of things I can throw out. If anybody, you probably haven't heard because we haven't circulated it super widely, but we have started the Momentum podcast.
Yes.
And that is available on SoundCloud right now. But one of the neat conversations we just recorded and just released is with Steve Shadrach, the author of the God Ask.
Okay.
And if part of getting your YFC Canada address, you get the Momentum emails where you find out neat stuff like that.
Right.
And there's always great resources. So.
I listened to the podcast where you recorded Paul Robertson. The very first podcast in there, excellent. And you've got some other podcasts there. You'll find them again in the YFC resources area. And so that, so YFC has come miles and miles and miles in providing resources, and we need to give them a good hand. Yeah. We don't have to feel alone. The challenge still feels as big as it did before we had that, only now we've got the tools that we can get right at it and go there, all right? And so that, so we've got the resources. These are some of the resources that People Raising by Dylan and Shadrach. We cannot proceed another slide until we talk about prayer. Prayer and ministry partner development. They just go hand in hand, and Shadrach is just so convinced that prayer has to precede the request for ministry partnership. And I just encourage you to pray, pray, pray. Pray specifically that God will give you the thoughts of where to go and how to fund this. I really hesitate to tell this story, but I will. Because I practiced this, especially in conjunction with our golf tournament. It's coming up in the beginning of August. We're looking to raise $25,000 to cover the entire golf expenses prior to tournament day, and then when we've covered those expenses, we'll go after our local community businesses for partnerships from $1,500 to $2,000 to $175 for an individual golfer. So I've been praying, and the Lord gave me 5 names that I jotted down. And it's important that you jot these down as the Lord gives you those names in your prayer life. Jot them down so that you've got an accountability to it. It's like a goal. A written goal has 80% more chances of getting you there than an unwritten goal. And so I've been praying for Roy at Steinbach Feeds. They're right on Main Street. I've been praying for Roy about a week, and Roy has become a good friend of mine, and I go to him at least once a year at the end of the year to ask for a year-end gift, and he's always very generous. And so I just had a December year-end gift from him, and now it's only in April, and I'm going to ask him for another gift. And I'm asking him for a specific gift, and I'd asked the Lord for that. We're asking him for $5,000. We're looking for 5 partners for $5,000 each. $25,000. So I see Roy pulling up, walking into his office. I pull my car right up to the front of his curb, walk in and said, is Roy in? I knew darn well he was there because I'd just seen him walk in. And he heard me, and so he said, yeah, I've got time for you. So I went and sat down and I said, Roy, I'm here to ask you specifically whether you'd be interested. And that's about how our conversation went. I'm here today to ask you if you'd consider giving $5,000 to our golf tournament. We're asking for 5 partners so that we can cover our expenses up front. And he just looked at me and he said, yep, I'd like to do that. I fell out of my chair, and we talked for a few more minutes. This whole visit was 5 minutes. And we walked out of there. I saw him walk to the receptionist or to the accountant and give her the little paper that says, send $5,000 to YFC, earmark golf. So I got in my car and praised God for that and drove down to the next business that was on my list, a very large hog company. And I've been at their place 3 times already because I've been praying for Arthur and Harold. And they don't have time to see me. And I thought, okay, God, that's fine. So I go around the corner to my friend Linda at E.G. Penner's. And is Linda in? Yeah, she's there. She makes time for me anytime I come by. She likes me. I'll tell you why in a little minute. And so we're talking, and she said, what brings you here today? And I said, I'm here to ask if you'd give $5,000. She had just given about $7,000 at year end, partly to my personal support, partly to general. I said, would you give $5,000 to cover the expenses of a golf tournament? And she says, Ernie would, so I'm going to. And so again, about a 5-minute conversation, and now I've got $10,000. And I am just like, God, this is far too good. And then it was kind of, well, didn't you pray about this, Harms? Didn't you pray about it? But we're blown away when it happens. The reason Ernie likes me is that he was the first man I ever met way back in my youth ministry days. He came in my office, and he was just bawling. He said, I don't know what to do with my 14-year-old daughter. And so I said, I don't know. I've never had kids. I was 22 or 23 at the time. And so we chatted, and I kept visiting Ernie from time to time, never thinking I'd ever ask him or his company for funds. He's got a huge company in Steinbach. And Ernie and I just developed this relationship of love and understanding. I walked with his son, told him I couldn't marry him because he was trying to marry, he was an unbeliever, he was trying to marry a believer. I said, I can't do that. And so I thought, well, that's the end of my relationship with that family. Ange and I were the only people at the marriage ceremony. Mom and Dad didn't even get there. And then we went to a park, took pictures with Ernie and Linda. And so there's a relationship that's developed. And that relationship is important, not from a money perspective. If you go looking to just develop the relationship from a money perspective, don't bother. Don't waste your time. Go with a genuine interest of, what can I do? How can I be involved in your life? Ministry partner development. I've never been so ecstatic since Dave Brereton took it upon himself to change the culture of Youth for Christ in moving from donors, organ donors, to ministry partners. You see the difference? Ministry partners is, how can I help you? How can you help me? And that it's a mutual understanding. So prayer, participating in that. I wish I could say that all my contacts for the $5,000 partners have gone as smoothly. That was a good day. And so for all those good days, there's some rougher days that come in between there. But prayer goes a long way. And so don't forget to pray about who you're going to say. And you say, but I'm so unqualified to do this. And Henry Blackaby addresses that, and he says, that's an interesting concept, but it's not biblically sound. Name one leader in the Bible whom the Lord called who was qualified. Every one of them, including Moses and Mary, claimed in one way or the other that they were the wrong person for the job. Can you see Mary? Whoa, no, reverse this pregnancy. I'm not qualified. Joseph. The reality is that the Lord never calls the qualified, he qualifies the called. When Henry was asked what it meant to be called, he emphasized humility. If you have a teachable spirit and your ego is out of the way, the Lord and others around you will qualify you. Go back to this often and read this. We all feel unqualified. The God ask principle. As I'm praying, I'm asking the Lord to put me in touch with supporters. And I'm asking that the supporters will have a vision, a prompting from the Holy Spirit and from the Lord, so that this circle just finishes completely And again, read the God Ask to get a deeper understanding of all of that. Sorry we're going so fast. Lots of this. You've got the notes in your binder, and the 5 key principles there. Understanding the biblical for basis support raising. Slaying the giants. What are the giants? What's holding you back from raising that money? Again, answered in there. Pray and plan well, and then the face-to-face ask, and then cultivating that relationship, which is where we just kind of landed there. And so that you've got all these slides in your notes there. Go back to them often. Your vision of why you're in YFC has to be so clear. Momentum will help you develop that. There's some worksheets at the end of this session that will again guide you to writing a longer version of your vision. Try saying that real fast. Version of your vision, and a 3-minute. Does YFC National still expect all the staff to have a 1-minute or a 1-line job description? Yes. Try that. It's the best thing to be able to help you. Why am I in Youth for Christ? A 1-sentence vision statement that you can tell people really, really quickly. Your vision has to be crystal clear. It has to be in line with the organization that you're going to partner with, Youth for Christ. That we're here to participate in the body of Christ in responsible evangelism of youth, presenting them with the person, work, and teaching of Christ, discipling them into the church. That may have changed somewhat, but I think that's probably as accurate as YFC visions ever, or mission statements ever get. So how do I fit into that vision? How do I relate to that in Steinbach or wherever you are, and having a really good, clear statement of why we're doing it? How does that relate in the scriptures? And then inviting people. As you invite, there's 2 words I want to introduce to you, and well, not introduce, you've known these words for a very long time. Opportunity versus obligation. Nobody owes us anything. Our job in ministry partner development is to create an opportunity for people to participate. If we go with a vision of obligation, then go and find a golf game that you can do. If you're obligating people, you must. We had a lady on our board of directors for a while, and she was gung-ho on selling our sponsorships on the street to the street businesses. And we found out about it very, very quickly because people started complaining about how I'm not obligated to buy a golf sponsorship with your tournament. There's 14 others that I can participate. Why do you think I have to participate? And I said, whoa. Nobody's obligated. And we need to take that into our ministries, that we're creating opportunities. We're creating that invitation to come in and to participate in the big picture of what God wants to do with the youth in Steinbach, southern Manitoba, Canada, and helping them to understand, inviting them in, and making it so attractive that they wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And that'll take a little bit of time. It'll take a little bit of creativity, and you need to invite the help of your chapter staff to help you develop that concept and inviting. It needs to be engaging for your volunteer ministry partners so that they can have a sense that I'm actually doing something when that $50 goes out of my account every month. I need to know that that money is being used well. And they need to be able to see our staff out for coffees, interacting with kids. If they just see me in the office all the time, they're going to start wondering, I thought this guy was interacting with kids. And some of our jobs don't go there, but as a rule, that's the vision of ours. So, needs to be engaging and rewarding. Well, where's the reward going to come from? The reward's going to come from, again, the story. You coming back, telling the story of what just happened. Make sure you keep a log of stories that are happening so that you're not telling the same story over and over. I've read some newsletters from different never from Youth for Christ, but from other organizations, where they tell the same stinking old story over and over and over. Make sure you've got fresh, new stories and so that it's vibrant and it's, whoa, here's what we've accomplished together. That's pretty exciting. And then creating that presentation, going not in Jim Harm's strength, but in God's strength. And it comes back to that prayer. Confident that he who began a good work in you will complete it. I love that verse. Yeah. He didn't just mess around and get started. He wants to finish. He wants to finish. And so depend on God. It's not about you. Know your presentation very, very clearly so that you'll still be stumbling. After 30 years, I still stumble from time to time when I'm trying to tell people about my work at YFC. Partly because it's a battle against principalities and powers. If the evil one can discourage you from going out there to raise your ministry partners, that's a big battle won. And I'll tell you, I think we've lost lots and lots of staff over the years. I don't have a number for that, but lots and lots of staff who've just become discouraged from the ministry partner development, the donor solicitations, and just said, I'm done. I'm checking out. I'm going back to a job where I can get a third of the salary, right? And so it's a fight. It's a spiritual fight. And we dare not try and do it in our own strength, but in the strength of the Lord and going with God's blessing in that. And so there's a calling sheet that's there, and we're kind of repeating ourselves there. But again, having the 3-sentence, the short version of how you got called, and then your vision sheet. And our vision needs to include partners. I can't do YFC work without my ministry partners. Impossible. Kiki, same thing. I can't do it if I don't have partners. We depend on that. And so invite them and engage them and reward them for being there. Some questions real quickly right now. We've got a project we're going to be doing in a little bit, but a few questions, because it's one thing for me to babble about this stuff, and I'm pretty excited about it, and I love it, but I may not be scratching where you're itching. Yeah.
Do you feel, or have an opinion, say you're doing the fundraising work, you're putting in the effort, but still it's not coming in? Do you feel that maybe this is God's way of saying this is not what you're supposed to do, or is it? What's your opinion?
Yeah.
Because I've heard both sides of that.
Yeah.
Some people think, well, if you're putting in the work, then God will provide. If He's not, you're not supposed to be there.
Right.
I have heard, like, is that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a side to that that's true, and I think that's where, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, about having a ministry partner development coach, aside from Naomi and Daryl. Although they could be those people, but I think they've got so many people that they're coaching, so that you need somebody a little more local. If you're doing this entirely on your own and just alone, I think the most logical point at that point is I'm bailing, right? But if you've got a ministry partner coach that you're bouncing this stuff around with, and we might as well talk about that person now. I think you all need to find yourself a ministry partner coach other than Daryl and Naomi, and look at them as resources, but someone that's going to hold you accountable, somebody that you can talk to about your progress or your regress, your discouragement, your encouragement in ministry partner. And that person could be the same as your spiritual mentor, and you're just inviting them to go. But it's someone who's going to kick your butt. Kick your butt. What is that? Somebody's going to kick your butt, who's going to kick your butt, and that you're meeting up with at least once every 2 weeks to report on. Here's my plan. Because I can make a list of 10 people that I want to call in the next 2 weeks, and if nobody sees that list, whether I meet it or not doesn't really matter, except for myself. I might get a little discouraged myself, but if Ron knows my list, And he'll ask me 2 weeks from now, so how many of these guys did you catch? And it's not a bad thing if you've only caught 5 out of 10, but at least you've done 5 because you know Ron's going to be asking you. So I think that at that point to discern with that ministry partner coach, with your directors in your ministry, you know, what are your thoughts? You know, let's pray through this. You know, should I be leaving as a result of not getting our finances? Does that make sense? Is that a good answer? Yeah. So it's bringing, if we're doing this Lone Ranger style, it's pretty dang lonely. If we're doing it as a partnership team, it's pretty darn encouraging. Much more encouraging. Okay? We should take a quick stretch. Stretch. Bathroom. Yes, you could stretch to the bathroom. Be back in 10 minutes. I'm slightly unnerved, not really, to bring up the whole using the media for using media to communicate with your people. Scott and I were just talking about the laborious task of writing letters, of writing information, and all of that sort of a thing, and to communicate with your ministry partners. And the media has done such an amazing advance in allowing us to use the tools of, pardon me, I'm old, Facebook, Twitter, and whatever. I don't know what the last one is out there, but which one is it? Instagram, right. My wife and daughter, they're on Instagram, and then they get creeped out by somebody, and they... So I'm a Facebook creeper, but I think it's a marvelous tool to be able to do some mass communications and to do little blips. I was picking up the mail from my mom and dad when they were traveling in winter times, and now we've moved them into a care home because they just weren't managing very well. My dad's 90 and my mom's 77 with dementia. And so I've got them to look after, my kids and grandkids to look after, and I'm saying, God help me. But when I looked at my mom and dad's mail, oh my God, that's the only word that fits. They were getting at least 44 letters from 44 organizations asking them for significant dollars. 44 letters to this little old couple, 90 years old. My dad's not that wealthy. He's well-to-do. He's got lots to take him the next 10 years if he makes it to 100. I don't think he will, but I'm kind of hoping he doesn't. But did I say that?
Because you don't want him to suffer, right?
Right. I don't want him to suffer. I said to my dad, and I've got a great relationship with my dad. I said to my dad, if you pass away while I'm in Hamilton, just get them to put you on ice till I'm back. You know, and so we laughed. We laughed about that, and
Sticky notes on my dad's desk. Like Divs, Caitlin's.
yeah, that's perfect. No doubt. No doubt. But so there's a couple of issues at play there, right? Because some of your partners are aging out, and when one of your aged out partners pulls away, Cliff in our office lost 4 significant partners in the course of 7 months. His in-laws, his mom, his son. His son wasn't a financial partner, but a key partner. His wife, and for him, loss was holy. Look out! And so that, but his father-in-law was a significant ministry partner financially, and now Cliff's 70, still working in our office, and he's older than I am, and which is amazing. But now he's got to make up that significant gift that's there, and so those are some of the issues that are there, and that's where you come back to prayer. God put me in touch with another new segment. Here's the part that I've been really, really excited about in our office. We've hired some very young staff recently, and they use social media to recruit their partners. Do an amazing job at putting together videos, putting together little invitations for them to different things. And the people just respond. Young people, their peers, ages 24 to 30, and they're giving $5 and $10 a month, but they're partnering with them. And they're, do you know what? And we need to celebrate this. Our staff in Steinbach, all 8 of us, are fully funded. Praise God. You know, and that's we live in a very, very generous community. I'll tell you that, and I'll grant you that. And if you look on these maps that have intensities for people giving to philanthropy, that's the word I was looking for. Steinbach area is #1 in Canada, but we also have people coming in from around the world, flying in to Low and Windows, flying into E.G. Penners, asking for money. And so these people have, and lots of your companies in your cities, have people strictly devoted to accepting requests from organizations like Youth for Christ and people like you and me for funds. That's all they do, is just take those requests and then process them. And so we're not the only ones asking for money. And so opportunity versus obligation. They have to decide where they want to put their dollars. Well, how do you make your presentations? And we're going to do a little hands-on thing here. And in your small groups, again, you need to have 2 pages of this. Here, I'll keep one set here. And so take the, like, if you can distribute that on your side, take the top 2 pages. Jana, do you want to do this? Make sure that everybody gets them there. We're going to practice making our presentation, our pitches. You're going to have to work really, really fast. And I'll already say we're not going to be done by 3:30. It'll be a little bit later. But I want you to be quickly creative, because you'll be able to use a lot of what you've already done in deputation development. And you're going to be looking to make a presentation to 4 different types. So in your small group, you kind of split up your team and pick 2 that you're going to work at. Presenting to your church family on Sunday morning, contacting your medical doctor. Have you ever asked your medical doctor to support you? You ask him to check you out. So medical doctors are great. They can give you a second opinion just like that. Inviting a close family member or inviting a former schoolmate. So get in your small groups and pick 2 of these. Pick 2 of them in your small groups and put together a presentation. You will be, are there more needed? One more set? Here, take mine. Take mine. No prizes for this, only the as you go. So I'd ask you not to leave the room if you possibly can, just kind of swing your chairs around. Quickly put together a presentation for 2, make sure your group has 2 of these, 2 presentations. We won't have time to see them all presented, but we want to learn from how you would do it.